Since ancient times, humans have used various totems and rites to drive out evil spirits. They were always looking for ways to protect themselves from the things that bump in the night. Groups of 12 would perform ritual dances to invoke a power from beyond. It was all about calling down something strong enough to stand against the darkness. Anything that went against nature was called a Yao, while things with a spiritual core were known as Jing. The world was full of these weird categories for the supernatural. If a soul refused to move on, it became a Gui, and any object that turned into something abnormal was a Guai. There was a label for every kind of creepiness you could imagine. To keep all these monsters in check, Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty established the Silly Shaowei. This group was also known as the Crouching Tiger, and they were basically the elite supernatural police. They specialized in taking down witchcraft and beheading any ghost or demon that caused trouble. For a long time, they were the ones keeping the land of Shenzhou safe and peaceful. But the peace didn't last forever. In the year 1900, a fallen star hit the planet, and spiritual energy came rushing back with a vengeance. From that day on, ancient demons and specters started waking up all over the place. The world was about to get a lot more crowded with things that shouldn't exist. Flash forward to the present, and this unnamed victim is living through a straight-up horror movie. She's huddled in her closet, frantically trying to report an emergency to the police. She's sobbing into the phone, begging them to save her because she's absolutely terrified. The dispatcher tries to keep her calm, asking if there's a robber or someone threatening her safety. She shakes her head, her face pale in the light of her phone screen. She tells them it's nothing like that, she's run into something unclean. It all started with a pair of red embroidered shoes she bought while traveling. Ever since she brought them home, things have been getting weirder and weirder. Every single night, she's haunted by the same nightmare of a woman dressed in red. The ghost just stands there in those shoes, staring at her without saying a single word. The worst part is that the ghost gets a little closer in every dream. Just a few nights ago, that skeletal face was practically pressed right up against her own. The girl is on the verge of a total breakdown, explaining how she's been living in fear for days. She even tried to burn the shoes to get rid of them, but that didn't do a thing. No matter what she does, the shoes just keep coming back. She looks down and sees them sitting right there on her bedside table again, like they're waiting for her. She begs the officers to come quickly, wondering why it's taking them so long to get there. Her voice is barely a whisper as she huddles among her clothes. She tells them she's hiding in the inner room's wardrobe and pleads for them to hurry. But then, the line starts to fill with heavy static. "Officer?" she asks, her eyes wide as she stares at the phone. The silence on the other end is deafening. Then, a voice that sounds like grinding bone comes through the speaker, "So this is where you're hiding." Her heart drops as she realizes the ghost has found her. She doesn't wait around, she bolts out of the closet and runs for the door. She knows no one is coming to save her anymore. Just as she reaches for the door, a massive thud shakes the wood. Something is trying to smash its way in. She freezes, staring at the door as the heavy banging continues. She's trapped in her own home with nowhere left to run. It's the 18th day of the first lunar month, a date steeped in old superstitions. In some circles, it's considered a day for a very different kind of celebration. To some, it's an auspicious day for a wedding, but the bride they're talking about isn't human. The ghost bride looms over the girl, her skeletal face twisted into a horrific grin. The ritual demands that the red bridal trousseau be lifted. But in this case, the ceremony ends in blood rather than vows. 1 inch, 1 grudge. The ghost bride sits under a red moon, holding the victim's severed head like a trophy. By the time the police cars finally pull up to the apartment complex, the nightmare is already over. The morning sun rises over a scene of pure tragedy. Meanwhile, right next door, a guy named Wei Yuan is just starting his morning routine. He's busy sweeping the yard of his new place, totally oblivious to the horror that just went down. He's thinking about his luck, glad that he finally found a place to stay while looking for work in the city. He's hopeful for a fresh start, even if his new house is a bit of a fixer-upper. But then he hears the sirens and looks over at the residential complex next door. He sees a police car parked at the entrance and wonders what's going on. He watches as the paramedics wheel out a body bag towards the ambulance. Looks like something really did happen over there, he mutters, feeling a chill. Suddenly, a loud clang rings out from inside his own house. Wei Yuan jumps, wondering if he's about to get robbed on his very first day. He drops the broom and sprints toward the front door, his heart racing. He's not about to let some thief take a liking to his shabby little house. He bursts inside and checks the room, letting out a sigh of relief when he sees nobody's there. He figures he was just overthinking it, after all, he's too poor for a thief to even bother with. But then he spots the shrine and freezes. An ancient bronze waist tag is standing perfectly upright, even though he's sure he left it lying flat. He picks it up to inspect it, noticing the intricate tiger head design on the front. It says, "Silly Xiaowei of the Great Han," in ancient characters. The moment he grips it, a massive, spectral tiger head appears behind him with a thunderous roar. Wei Yuan stands there, paralyzed, as the golden energy fills the room. He nearly drops the thing, wondering if it's some kind of divine artifact left behind by the old man who owned the place. Shadows swirl around him like a tiger on patrol. He flips the tag over and sees his own surname, Wei, carved into the back. He starts to wonder if this is some kind of heirloom passed down through his ancestors. He gets a huge grin on his face, thinking about how his family must have had some serious glory days. He poses with the tag, feeling like a hero for a split second. But then he lets out a sharp gasp as he accidentally nicks his finger on the sharp edge of the tag. A single drop of blood touches the metal, and the room starts to change. As soon as the blood touches the bronze, it's like a switch is flipped. The tag reacts instantly, soaking up the drop on that white cloth. A glowing sheet of paper manifests right out of thin air, surrounded by swirling black shadows. It's a literal wanted notice from the ancient Crouching Tiger office, calling for the execution of some chaotic spirit. Wei Yuan stands there completely frozen, staring at the drawing of those red shoes. He realizes this isn't just some antique, it's a divine contract targeting the very thing that caused that murder next door. He tries to shake off the weirdness, thinking that if he doesn't understand something, he can just ask the internet. He's a modern guy, after all, there's got to be a logical explanation for this. He heads straight to his computer and starts typing away, looking for any mention of haunted red slippers. He's hunched over the keyboard, desperate for some kind of lead. But all he gets is a bunch of ghost stories from random forums and shopping results for cheap slippers. He leans back, realizing the tag only reacted the moment that body was carried out by the police. Suddenly, his room starts getting cold, like, bone-chilling cold. A thick, unnatural fog begins rolling in through the door, and he has no idea what's happening. He spots a faint red glow through the mist and wonders if it's just another police car outside. He walks toward it, but the atmosphere feels way too heavy. Before he can process anything, he's not in his room anymore. He's standing in front of a massive, ancient Chinese gate shrouded in that same creepy fog. The scale of the place is absolutely mind-blowing. He looks up at the towering architecture, his heart hammering against his ribs as he wonders where on earth he's been transported to. He scans the area, his eyes wide as he tries to make sense of the nightmare world he's stepped into. Everything is silent, save for a faint, eerie melody floating on the wind. He spots a gnarled, ancient tree draped in white paper strips. At the base of the trunk, a dark silhouette is waiting, and the lyrics of the song start to get clearer and more disturbing. A ghost bride in a bright red robe is floating right over an old stone well. She looks like something straight out of a legend, her long black hair swaying in the spectral breeze. She lifts her veil just enough to reveal a skeletal face and glowing red eyes. She calls out to him, her voice a chilling whisper that says she's been waiting for him to finally show up. Hair starts whipping around her like living shadows as she fully reveals her horrific form. She's grinning like a maniac, her fingers twitching as she starts to move toward him. She floats closer, her presence filling the air with pure dread. She tells him it's been a very long wait, and she sounds way too happy to see him. But just as she's about to reach him, a massive, flaming tiger spirit head erupts behind Wei Yuan. It lets out a roar that shakes the very ground, golden energy exploding everywhere. The force of the roar sends the ghost bride flying backward, her form shattering like glass as she screams in agony. The nightmare world begins to tear itself apart. Wei Yuan sits bolt upright in his bed, gasping for air as cold sweat pours down his face. He looks around his room, relieved to find everything back to normal. He grabs his phone and sees that it's exactly 3 a.m. He's completely confused, having no memory of ever falling asleep in the first place. He rubs his temples, feeling a massive headache coming on from the aftereffects of that dream. It felt way too real to be just a normal nightmare. A notification dings on his phone, snapping him out of his daze. He's got a new email, and at this hour, it's probably not good news. He opens the message, wondering who would be sending him an email in the middle of the night. His face is pale in the blue light of the screen. It turns out to be an interview notice for a job at the Folklore Museum. The pay is $5,000 a month with food and housing included, which sounds like a total steal for someone in his position. By noon the next day, he's standing outside the museum, which looks like a massive traditional temple. He calls out for the boss, hoping he's at the right place. He's looking around with a confused expression, surrounded by a bunch of imaginary question marks. The place is dead silent, and he's starting to get a weird vibe from the architecture. He finally finds the boss, a lean old man with gray hair and pince-nez glasses. The guy is sitting at a desk, smoking a long pipe and looking like he stepped out of a history book. The boss looks up from his papers, his expression stern. Wei Yuan is starting to sweat, especially when the old man says he needs to confirm something important before they start. A dark, heavy aura settles over the room as the boss leans in close. He looks Wei Yuan straight in the eyes and asks him a single, bone-chilling question: "Are you afraid of ghosts?" Wei Yuan doesn't miss a beat, playing it off like he's a total skeptic. He asks what kind of ghosts could possibly exist in a world where everyone's a materialist. But internally, he's thinking this old man looks way too twitchy for his liking. He keeps his hand behind his back, gripping that bronze tag just in case things get weird. He squeezes the tiger head artifact, feeling a small sense of security from the cool metal. He's not taking any chances with this materialist boss. The boss stares at him for a long moment, sizing him up. He notes that the young man is full of yang energy, which apparently makes him a good candidate for the job. He lets out a puff of smoke and decides to just go with it. He figures that since Wei Yuan sent the resume at 3 in the morning, the kid knew what he was signing up for. He gets up and gestures for Wei Yuan to follow him deeper into the building. He wants to show the new hire around the work environment before they finalize anything. As they step inside, the atmosphere shifts instantly. The hallway is lined with traditional furniture and glowing paper lanterns that cast long, flickering shadows. Wei Yuan crosses his arms, shivering as the temperature drops. It was warm enough outside, but in here, it feels like a walk-in freezer. He stops to look at a pair of life-sized paper figures dressed in traditional burial robes. Their painted faces and frozen expressions give him the absolute creeps. The museum is much larger than it looks from the outside. They walk through a massive hall filled with artifacts, the scale of the place making Wei Yuan feel tiny. He spots an open bottle of cola sitting on a table, completely flat and abandoned. He wonders who would waste a good drink like that without even finishing the fizz. The boss stops and looks at the surroundings with a somber expression. He mentions that this museum was his son's life work, and you can tell it means a lot to him. He points further down the hall, explaining that there's a living area where people actually stay. Wei Yuan asks if he can take a look, eager to see where he'll be sleeping. The boss pauses, a look of hesitation crossing his face as he looks toward the back of the museum. He seems to be weighing whether or not to let the young man see the living quarters just yet. Wei Yuan waves his hand dismissively, offering to skip it if it's too much trouble for the old man. But the boss just laughs it off, telling him to go ahead and explore while he waits outside, since that's where his new home will be anyway. As he turns away, Wei Yuan's expression shifts to one of deep suspicion, a single bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. He knows that a job offer arriving at 3 a.m. is never as simple as it sounds, and he's glad he kept that ancient tiger tag tucked in his pocket. He walks toward the living quarters with a determined stride, his eyes scanning the traditional architecture for any signs of trouble. He makes a mental note to run for the hills the moment that tag reacts or anything starts moving in the shadows. Standing alone in the courtyard, the boss watches him go, his hands clasped behind his back as he thinks of his late son, Yang. This is his fourth attempt at hiring someone this month, and he's starting to fear the museum might be doomed to close its doors for good. A grim look settles over the old man's features as he recalls the terrifying things that have been happening lately. It wasn't just the previous hires who were spooked, he saw the anomalies himself just the night before. The museum takes on a much more sinister appearance under the cover of darkness, its red lanterns casting a blood-like glow over the courtyard. The silence is broken only by the sound of phantom knocking at the heavy wooden doors in the dead of night. Long, distorted shadows begin to crawl across the exterior walls, looking like thin, reaching figures. Somewhere in the darkness, the impossible sight of blood begins to seep through the ancient stone, marking the start of another long night. The boss looks like he's about to have a heart attack, rambling about some mysterious figure wrapped in a blanket that's been stalking him. He's clearly on edge, and whatever he thinks is behind him has him completely spooked. Turns out, the terrifying phantom is just Wei Yuan, who looks more like a giant, shivering burrito than a ghost. He tries to explain himself, but the boss is so startled he lets out a yell that probably could have been heard in the next town over. The boss is practically jumping out of his skin, demanding to know what's going on. Wei Yuan just laughs it off awkwardly, explaining that it was freezing inside and he just grabbed the first blanket he could find to stay warm. After a brief coughing fit to regain his dignity, the boss decides the kid actually has guts. He figures Wei Yuan must have some seriously strong, yang energy, to be this casual while literally being surrounded by the supernatural. The boss doesn't waste any time, handing over a contract and laying out the deal. He'll cover utilities and even throw in a grocery allowance. It's a pretty sweet setup for a night watchman job, provided you don't mind the drafty museum. Wei Yuan signs the paperwork without a second thought, looking pretty pleased with himself. He figures since his bronze waist tag isn't reacting to anything, the place must be clean and he's basically getting paid to hang out. The courtyard of the museum sits quiet as the sun starts to set, giving the whole place a bit of an eerie, ancient vibe. It's the kind of setting where you just know things are about to get weird once the lights go out. As the boss heads for his car, he pauses to give Wei Yuan one last look. He seems almost surprised the kid is actually staying, calling out to him as he opens the door to head home for the night. He tells Wei Yuan to just give him a shout if he decides to quit, sighing about how he might just have to shut the whole museum down eventually. Wei Yuan watches him go, thinking the old man is definitely a few sandwiches short of a picnic. The car pulls away, leaving Wei Yuan alone in the silence. He checks his tag again, noting that it's completely quiet, which he takes as a sign that there aren't any actual malicious spirits hanging around to ruin his night. Wei Yuan stands there with a smug grin, convinced the boss was just being paranoid about old ghost stories. Little does he know, 3 very real, very creepy spirits are looming right behind his back, looking ready to pounce. The blue demon spirit reaches out with a massive, clawed hand, its red eyes locked onto Wei Yuan's shoulder. It's moving in for a surprise, and our guy is still standing there completely oblivious to the danger. As the spirit's hand makes contact, smoke starts pouring off Wei Yuan's jacket like he's caught on fire. It's an instant reaction to the supernatural touch, and it definitely catches his attention. Suddenly, the bronze waist tag in his hand flares up with a brilliant golden light that practically blinding. Wei Yuan realizes something is definitely behind him, and it's not just a draft. The blue demon spirit recoils, its hand sizzling and glowing red as it screams in pain. It's totally shocked, shouting about how Wei Yuan's yang energy is way too hot for it to handle. Wei Yuan doesn't wait for an explanation, spinning around and raising the glowing tag like he's about to deliver a holy beatdown. He's gone from bored watchman to demon hunter in about 3 seconds flat. He throws a haymaker that connects right with the spirit's gut, bolstered by a burst of golden energy. The impact sends the massive blue guy flying backward across the courtyard, leaving a trail of sparks in its wake. Wei Yuan stands there looking absolutely thrilled that he actually landed a hit. He finds the sensation of punching a ghost surprisingly satisfying, even comparing the impact to hitting a giant ball of cotton. The spirit hits the floor hard, leaving strange, wet footprints as it tries to scramble away. Wei Yuan isn't letting it off that easy, taunting it as he watches the creature struggle to find its footing on the slick tile. The blue demon spirit hauls it toward the museum entrance, but Wei Yuan is right on its heels. He's got a second wind and he's ready to see this ghost-busting session through to the end. Cornered on the stairs, the demon tries to play tough, warning Wei Yuan that his ghost brothers and sisters won't let him get away with this. He's clearly desperate, trying to intimidate the guy who just punched him across a courtyard. A few feet away, the brothers and sisters in question, a skeleton and a pale lady, are busy drinking cola and talking about how great it tastes. They seem way more interested in the fizzy drinks than helping their buddy out of a jam. Wei Yuan completely ignores their snacks and goes back to work, pinning the blue demon spirit down and delivering a flurry of punches. The spirit is begging for its life, screaming at the others to come save him while he still has a chance. The pale woman spirit doesn't even look up from her straw, telling the guys to stop messing around. She points out that Wei Yuan's energy is so strong they couldn't even manifest properly if they tried, so they might as well just enjoy their drinks. Wei Yuan towers over the group with a menacing grin, his eyes glowing red in the shadows. He tosses out a casual comment about finding more dirty things to clean up, which immediately has the spirit sweating. The pale woman spirit is practically in tears, begging the little brother to stop before he does more damage. Even the soda bottles on the table are rattling from the pure tension in the air. The whole group of spirits is huddled in a corner now, sobbing and wondering if this guy is even human. They're terrified that he might be some kind of elite ghost-hunting priest who doesn't show any mercy to the undead. Wei Yuan kicks back in a chair, looking way too relaxed after his workout. He reads the tag's description, which confirms these guys are just harmless, wandering spirits who haven't actually hurt anyone, meaning they aren't worth any merit points yet. He realizes he can only see the faint outlines of the ghosts through the tag's power. It's enough for now, but he starts wondering what he'd do if he actually ran into a malicious spirit that actually wanted to kill him. The tag flashes some new info about a treasury where he can unlock divine weapons by earning merit. It's basically a leveling system, but he's currently sitting at 0, so the big doors stay locked and chained. Wei Yuan is immediately hooked on the idea of getting his hands on evil-slaying divine weapons. He's looking at the tag like it's a golden ticket, suddenly much more interested in this whole demon officer business. Since he can't get into the treasury yet, he checks out some unorthodox methods the tag offers to fully open his vision to the spirit world. He's impressed by how smart the artifact is for giving him alternative options. The first method involves feeding grass from a grave to a yellow ox and collecting its tears. Wei Yuan takes one look at that and decides it's way too expensive and time-consuming to even consider. The second method is even worse, chopping off a crow's head and swallowing its eyeballs while they're still fresh. It's a pretty grim way to get supernatural vision, even for a guy who just punched a demon. Wei Yuan is physically gagging at the thought of eating raw bird eyes. He shuts that idea down immediately, looking for literally anything else that doesn't involve a snack from a graveyard. Before he even reads the third method, he's already screaming "pass" and running for cover. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't any less disgusting than the last two. He's getting desperate now, begging for just one reliable method that won't make him want to throw up. He looks like he's about to give up on the whole yin-yang thing entirely. Finally, he finds a winner, the fifth method. It just requires some willow leaves, morning dew, and a yin object to soak them in, basically a simple ritual that'll let him see the undead for a short while. Wei Yuan is all smiles now that he's found a ritual that doesn't involve eating eyeballs. He's ready to get to work, looking like he's actually excited to see what else is hiding in the museum. He sets up a bowl on a table in the courtyard, grumbling about his terrible luck for ending up in a haunted house. He figures if he can at least see the ghosts clearly, it'll be a lot easier to run away when things get real. With a mischievous grin, he realizes he's only missing one thing, a yin object. He looks over at the terrified spirits huddled on the ground, and it's pretty obvious who he's planning to borrow one from. Two little paper dolls stare at the bowl of water and the willow leaf, looking completely stumped. The courtyard is silent as they wait to see what kind of crazy plan Wei Yuan is going to pull off next. Wei Yuan picks up one of the paper dolls, assuring them he's not going to make them soak in the bowl. He's just looking for a little help with his ritual, and these guys are the perfect size to help out. He decides to borrow their essence instead, much to the horror of the blue demon and skeleton spirits watching from the sidelines. They clearly didn't sign up for this kind of boss, and they're looking pretty concerned about what comes next. Wei Yuan takes one look at what the spirits offered him and his face immediately drops. It's not exactly the high-grade mystical equipment he was hoping for to help him see the unseen. He stares at a pile of literal junk, a rotten fishing net and a bottle of poison. He can't believe these idiots actually consider this stuff their yin objects, and he's starting to question their usefulness. He turns to the skeleton warrior spirit, holding up a rusty-looking dagger. He asks if it belongs to him, hoping for something a bit more substantial than a smelly net or a bottle of toxins. Without waiting for an answer, he dunks the blade into his bowl of willow leaf water. Now all he has to do is wait for the clock to strike 12 and hope the ritual actually works. Wei Yuan heads out, telling the group of spirits to behave themselves while he's gone. They just stand there looking confused as he leaves them alone in the museum, probably wondering what they're supposed to do with themselves. The sun sets over the city, casting a long, golden shadow across the high-rise buildings. It's a quiet, normal-looking evening that masks the supernatural chaos brewing back at the museum. Back at an apartment complex, the air is filled with the sound of a mother's heartbroken wailing. A crowd has gathered, and it's clear that something truly terrible has happened in the neighborhood. Wei Yuan stops a guy in a suit to ask what's going on with all the commotion. The man looks at him like he's been living under a rock, surprised that anyone could miss such a tragedy. The guy explains that a young woman was murdered just as her life was finally getting on track. Her poor mother is left all alone, and the cruelty of the act has left the whole neighborhood in shock. He rants about how heartless the killer must be to do something like this. Wei Yuan listens in silence, his mind racing as he starts to connect the dots to his own strange experiences. Wei Yuan breaks out in a cold sweat, trying to convince himself this has nothing to do with him and his new job. He just wants to grab his gear and get back to the museum as fast as his legs can carry him. Night falls on the museum courtyard, and Wei Yuan finally announces that everything is ready. The wait is over, and it's time to see if his improvised ritual actually pays off. The spirits are huddled together in a purple haze, looking absolutely miserable and confused. They watch Wei Yuan with a mix of fear and curiosity, wondering what kind of madness he's about to unleash. Wei Yuan is practically glowing with excitement as he sticks a willow leaf to his eye. He starts laughing like a madman when he realizes he can actually see the spirits clearly now, no longer just outlines in the dark. The blue demon spirit leans in, whispering to the others if they think Wei Yuan can actually hear them talking. He's still nursing his bruises from their last encounter and doesn't want to provoke him further. The pale woman's spirit shrugs, thinking maybe their new boss just finds them too annoying to bother with. Wei Yuan overhears everything with a smug little smile, enjoying the fact that the tables have finally turned. He finally chimes in, admitting he was deaf to their voices before, but the ritual worked like a charm. The spirits look like they've seen a ghost, which is pretty ironic, all things considered. The blue demon spirit points a shaky finger behind Wei Yuan, asking about the girl who supposedly followed him in. Wei Yuan's face goes pale as he realizes he definitely didn't return to the museum alone. He turns around to find a nightmare standing right in the courtyard, the ghost bride in her blood-red bridal robes. Her glowing eyes are locked onto him, and the air around her is freezing. It's the exact same spirit from his nightmares, and she's brought the red embroidered shoes with her. Wei Yuan is desperately hoping this is still a dream, but the absolute terror he feels is way too real. The blue demon spirit tries to play the tough guy, asking the ghost bride where she dropped dead. It's a bold move that's about to backfire in the most painful way possible. The bride doesn't say a single word as her hair lashes out like a swarm of angry snakes. Wei Yuan yells for her to stop, but she's already moving for the kill with terrifying speed. The blue demon spirit's eye goes wide as he realizes he's way out of his league with this one. The predator has found its prey, and there's nowhere left to run. A thick strand of black hair punches right through the spirit's chest like a spear. He gasps in agony, completely pinned by the vengeful spirit while Wei Yuan watches on in horror. The hair starts wrapping around his neck and forcing its way into his mouth, cutting off his screams. The poor guy can barely choke out a complaint about her playing dirty before he's completely silenced. The ghost bride floats effortlessly, her hair lifting the massive blue demon spirit off the ground like he weighs nothing. She's literally draining the essence out of him, and he's helpless to stop it. Wei Yuan watches the brutal scene, knowing that if he doesn't act fast, his water ghost friend is going to be turned into a monster. He can't let another tragedy happen right in front of him. He grabs the dagger from the bowl, his knuckles white as he grips the hilt. He knows he's taking a massive risk, but he can't deal with two vengeful spirits roaming around the museum. He squares up against the ghost bride, who's floating in a sea of her own deadly, prehensile hair. It's a classic David versus Goliath moment, but with a lot more ghosts and a lot less hope. He holds out his bronze waist tag, which erupts in a blinding, golden light. He's putting all his faith in this ancient relic to protect him from the darkness lunging at him. A massive, flaming tiger manifests behind him, letting out a silent roar that shakes the very air. The true power of the crouching tiger tag is finally being unleashed. A torrent of fire and light slams into the ghost bride, lighting up the entire dark courtyard. It's a direct hit that looks like it could incinerate anything it touches. Wei Yuan dives through the flaming chaos, swinging his dagger to cut the blue demon spirit loose. He's moving with a speed and precision he didn't even know he possessed. The blue spirit hits the ground with a heavy thud, still leaking smoke from the hair that was just violating him. He's alive, but he's in no condition to keep fighting. Wei Yuan yells at the other spirits to get out of there while the bride is still reeling from the blast. He knows they won't last a second if she turns her malice toward them. He drops to one knee, his body suddenly feeling like it's made of lead. He's starting to realize that drawing on the tag's power comes at a heavy, draining cost to his own life force. He's panting for breath, wondering why this spirit is so much more powerful and terrifying in the real world. In his dreams, he could at least stand his ground, but here, she's a force of nature. He looks up, and his heart nearly stops. The ghost bride is standing right in front of him, looming like a giant shadow. She's recovered way faster than he expected. Up close, her face is a nightmare of pure malice, her skeletal eyes glowing with a sinister red light. She's clearly enjoyed the hunt, and now she's ready for the final kill. Wei Yuan swings his blade with everything he has left, determined to go down fighting if he has to. He's scared out of his mind, but more than that, he's absolutely fed up with being pushed around. Wei Yuan yells at the ghost bride, pleading for a moment of reason and questioning why she's so fixated on him when there's no personal grudge between them. He continues his desperate plea, asking if she doesn't remember the basic human decency she was taught by her parents back when she was still alive. The ghost bride responds with a monstrous scream, her black hair exploding outward to fill the entire courtyard as her eyes glow a savage red. Wei Yuan breaks into a cold sweat, immediately regretting his attempt to reason with a vengeful spirit who now looks 10 times more furious than before. Realizing talk is useless, he plants his feet in the museum courtyard and vows to fight to the bitter end if she refuses to back down. He thrusts his bronze tag forward, and a massive, flaming tiger manifests behind him, radiating a heat that matches his grim determination to tear her apart. A blinding bolt of blue lightning streaks down from the dark sky, striking the red lantern hanging from the museum's eaves with a violent crack. Wei Yuan flinches as the lightning strikes just feet away from him, his hand still clutching the glowing tag and his dagger. The sudden flash leaves Wei Yuan blinking in shock, his eyes searching the courtyard for any sign of his spectral enemy. He stares at the spot where the ghost bride stood, but only a fading cloud of black smoke remains as he realizes she vanished in an instant. Wei Yuan scratches his head in confusion, wondering if his words actually worked, while the blue demon and skeleton spirits watch him from a safe distance. The skeleton warrior spirit delivers a sharp slap to the blue demon spirit's head, explaining that the ghost didn't leave because of words, but because of the terrifying thunder. Wei Yuan's vision blurs as the adrenaline fades, his eyes half closing as he admits to himself that he feels completely hollowed out by the effort. His legs finally give way and he collapses onto the stone floor, the concerned voices of the spirits echoing around him as he slips into unconsciousness. Sometime later, Wei Yuan slowly opens his eyes to find himself lying in a bed, the ceiling of the museum room coming back into focus. He's immediately greeted by the relieved shouts of the blue demon spirit and the rest of the spectral gang, who have been hovering over him in worry. Wei Yuan weakly asks if the blue demon spirit is recovered, and the massive spirit beams, assuring his boss that he's already feeling right as rain. The bronze tag in Wei Yuan's hand pulses with a soft, golden light, drawing his attention back to the relic that saved his life. A spectral message appears before his eyes, announcing that his bravery has earned him a point of merit and unlocked a new mystical art. Ancient characters begin to glow on the walls of the room, describing the Nuo arts of demon banishment and the divine powers used to protect the innocent. Wei Yuan sits up in bed, staring at his palms as he feels the weight of the ancient knowledge settling into his mind. A glowing yellow talisman manifests right on his hand, the physical proof that he has mastered the art of demon banishment. He realizes that this power isn't just for banishing ghosts, it's a way for him to harness the unique abilities of the spiritual entities around him. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he thinks about how much easier it will be to manage spirits without having to hunt down their specific objects. He looks around the room, considering the 5 spirits already in his museum and how much stronger they could make him if he can win their loyalty. The room suddenly goes quiet, and Wei Yuan's expression shifts to one of confusion as he realizes his spectral companions have all vanished in the blink of an eye. He lets out a soft sound of surprise, his eyes darting around the empty space as a sudden, heavy chill settles over the room. He looks down at the floor and freezes, the red bridal shoes are sitting right by his bed, pointed toward him as he remembers the old omen about a ghost climbing into bed. Wei Yuan starts his day at the museum by interviewing the resident spirits about their deaths. The blue demon spirit admits he accidentally fell into the water while night fishing, while the pale woman spirit mistakenly drank pesticide while she was painting. Wei Yuan rubs his temples in disbelief. He can't believe these two died from such careless mistakes, especially when he's dealing with much bigger problems. He thinks back to the ghost bride, Qi Nyang, who attacked him in his dreams. Fishing and landscape painting skills aren't going to be any use when it comes to subduing a malicious spirit like her. He turns his attention to a third spirit, a skeletal warrior clad in ancient armor. This guy looks like he actually has some combat experience. The Qi army soldier sighs, admitting he's forgotten his own name after all this time. He still remembers serving under Commander Qi and fighting off pirates before waking up in this modern era. Wei Yuan's eyes widen in surprise. If this guy really served under the legendary Commander Qi, he's a piece of living history. A several hundred-year-old veteran like this should be a powerful ghost general. Wei Yuan is shocked that he's just hanging around as a mundane museum spirit. Wei Yuan leans in closer, asking the old warrior if he's actually skilled with a sword. The skeletal soldier lists off a whole arsenal of weapons he's mastered, from spears to matchlocks. He says his skills were just standard army training, but that's exactly what Wei Yuan needs. Wei Yuan smirks, finally finding a perfect subject to test his exorcise ghosts magical ability on. This guy is reliable and clearly knows his way around a fight. He asks the soldier for his cooperation, and the warrior immediately pledges his loyalty. The skeletal veteran says he's entirely at his disposal. Wei Yuan begins the ritual, his hands glowing with intense spiritual energy. The air around him crackles as he channels the ancient power he just unlocked. With a sharp command, he strikes a seal onto the soldier's forehead. A massive surge of light erupts as the binding process takes hold. The spirit of the Qi army soldier dissolves into swirling green energy. Wei Yuan can feel the weight of the spirit lodging itself directly into his right hand. He clenches his fist, feeling the veteran's strength under his absolute control. The ritual worked perfectly, giving him a powerful new weapon against the supernatural. A massive phantom of the armored warrior looms behind him, ready to strike. Wei Yuan tells his new guardian that since the other party has already come to his door, it's time to respond. The blue demon spirit and the pale woman spirit watch in awe, cheering for their boss. They're hyped to see him finally stepping up to hunt down the malicious ghost bride. The lady spirit is impressed that he's taking the initiative to attack such a powerful ghost. She thinks the young man has some serious guts. Wei Yuan pumps his fist in the air, shouting that he needs to report this whole mess to the police immediately. The spirits just stare at him with blank, confused looks. They think he's completely lost his mind if he thinks the cops can help with a ghost. Later, Wei Yuan looks down at the red embroidered shoes sitting on the museum floor. He realizes they've physically manifested in the real world, which means the danger is closer than ever. He pictures the courtyard from his dream, the old tree and the stone well. He's convinced that place is real and that it holds the secret to defeating the bride. He packs the red shoes into a cardboard box. He's hoping that by showing them to the police, he can persuade them to help him track down the courtyard. The next morning is bright and clear, but Wei Yuan is focused on the grim task ahead. He pulls up to the local police station and walks in, ready to report his supernatural problem to the authorities. Inside, he sits across from a young officer and tells him straight up that a ghost is trying to kill him. It's definitely the most unusual report the guy has taken all day. The officer just stares at him, completely stunned by the claim. He's clearly not sure whether to laugh or call for a psych eval. Wei Yuan sighs, breaking into a nervous sweat. He knew it wouldn't be easy to get the police to take a ghost case seriously. Suddenly, a woman with short brown hair walks into the room. She tells the young officer to go handle something else and leaves the matter to her. The officer snaps into a sharp salute, clearly respecting her authority. She has an air of professional intensity about her. She tells Wei Yuan to follow her, and he nervously complies, wondering what kind of unit she actually belongs to. In her private office, she flicks open a lighter and sparks a cigarette, looking completely unbothered. She introduces herself as Zhou Yi from the Special Operations Group. She sits across from Wei Yuan with a sharp, calculating gaze. Zhou Yi takes a puff and exhales, asking if he minds the smoke. She seems like the kind of professional who's seen it all. Wei Yuan says it's fine and starts describing his encounter with the ghost. He tells her about the dream, the courtyard, and the woman sitting by the stone well. Wei Yuan notices an earpiece and realizes she isn't wearing a standard uniform. He figures she must be a specialized professional sent from a higher department. Zhou Yi looks over his files, noting his travel history. She sees no recent contact with ghostly entities or dangerous areas, making his claims even more unusual. She leans forward, her eyes narrowing. She admits that while his story sounds crazy, the fact that he lived near a recent murder site might mean he's entangled with some residual Yin energy. Wei Yuan shifts uncomfortably under her intense gaze. It feels like she's trying to peer straight through him to find the truth. Zhou Yi stands up and asks if there have been any other physical signs besides the dreams. She's taking a much more investigative approach than the other cops. She leans against her desk, suggesting that they might need to use some more specialized methods to screen him for spiritual possession. Wei Yuan slides the box across the desk. Zhou Yi stares at it, her expression shifting as she senses something unusual inside. Wei Yuan watches her closely, hoping she's the professional she claims to be. He knows that if she isn't, seeing what's inside might give her nightmares for the rest of her life. Zhou Yi's eyes widen in shock as she opens the box. The air in the room suddenly feels heavy, saturated with a chilling spiritual energy. She touches her earpiece, listening to a report from her team. They've just reached the crime scene and discovered that the red embroidered shoes have vanished from the victim's feet. Back at the morgue, the corpse lies under a sheet, surrounded by yellow paper talismans. Despite the heavy spiritual suppression, the ghost's influence was strong enough to bypass their defenses and reclaim its property. A moment later, the team arrives back at the station, ready to update the captain on the situation. Two specialists in yellow trench coats introduce themselves to Wei Yuan. Zhou Yi is a disciple of the Weiming sect, and the man with glasses beside him goes by the Daoist name Xian Yi. Zhou Yi introduces them as her team members, the ones who reported the shoe's disappearance through her earpiece. Wei Yuan just nods, trying to take it all in. Xian Yi holds up a clipboard, asking Wei Yuan to describe the courtyard from his dream in as much detail as possible. He's ready to sketch it out for their investigation. To their surprise, Wei Yuan pulls out a perfectly drawn sketch he's already prepared. It's not just a rough outline, it's a professional-grade architectural drawing. Xian Yi gapes at the paper, his jaw dropping in sheer disbelief. He can't wrap his head around how a regular person could produce something so precise from memory. The entire team leans in, stunned by the detail in the drawing. They've never seen a witness provide such an accurate visual reference before. Xian Yi actually starts to tear up, frustrated that Wei Yuan's painting skills are leagues ahead of his own. He prides himself on his art, so this is a major blow to his ego. Wei Yuan stands back with his arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He's enjoying the reaction he's getting from these professionals. In reality, it wasn't his own skill at all. He used his controlling ghosts ability to let the pale woman spirit, a professional landscape painter, take over his hand and do the work. He lets out a small cough, trying to act humble. He asks if identifying the location from his dream will actually help them take down the malicious spirit. Suddenly, Zhou Yi reaches out and grabs him by the chin, her eyes narrowing as she inspects him. She admits that he's a lot smarter than he looks. She explains the basic principle of a malicious ghost: it's an entity empowered by intense negative emotions resonating with spiritual energy. It's a far cry from an ordinary wandering spirit. She lights up another cigarette, the smoke curling around them in the small room. She seems deep in thought as she analyzes the situation. She leans in close, her face inches from his, explaining how these negative emotions continue to intensify until the spirit becomes truly vicious. Wei Yuan can't help but blush at the sudden proximity. She exhales a thick cloud of smoke, her gaze fixed on him as if she's trying to read his soul. The atmosphere in the office is thick with tension. As she speaks, the smoke begins to twist and morph into terrifying shapes. She describes the hierarchy of spirits, from ordinary wandering ghosts to the far more dangerous malicious ones that have had unusual encounters. The smoke transforms into a resentful ghost, a skeletal figure wrapped in bandages. Wei Yuan is impressed. This woman clearly has some spiritual tricks of her own. She explains that the only way to deal with a malicious ghost is to find the source of its negative emotions. Only then can they hope to tame or destroy it. A vision of a soul trapped in agony appears in the smoke, illustrating the life worse than death that these spirits endure when they are consumed by resentment. She presses her hands together in a prayer-like gesture, mentioning that both Buddhists and Taoists call the act of destroying these entities deliverance. Xian Yi interrupts, announcing that he's found the location. It's an old theater in the former Jiangnan circuit, a place famous for opera that was sealed off years ago after a mysterious incident. Zhou Yi stands tall, a confident smirk on her face. She gives the order to head out to Jiangnan immediately to investigate the theater. She turns to Wei Yuan and tells him he's done enough. She orders him to go home and rest, insisting that this world of spirits is no place for ordinary people. She still feels like he's hiding something, though. Wei Yuan tries to protest, but she's already turning away. He doesn't want to be left out of the loop after everything he's seen. Before they leave, Xian Yi hands Wei Yuan a yellow paper talisman. He tells him to keep it safe and use it to protect himself. He makes it clear that Wei Yuan shouldn't even think about following them. In his eyes, a regular guy would only be a burden during a real ghost hunt. Still feeling a bit salty about the painting competition, he shoves a second talisman into Wei Yuan's hand. He figures it's better for the kid to be overprepared than dead. Zhao Yi hands him a stack of papers, telling him to sign a non-disclosure agreement before he leaves. They're in a hurry to catch the ghost, and they don't have time for a long goodbye. Wei Yuan watches them rush out of the room, left alone with his sketch and his new talismans. He feels a strange sense of unease as the door closes behind them. Suddenly, thick, unnatural smoke begins to pour out from under the doors in the hallway. It feels cold and carries a heavy, spiritual weight. He stops in his tracks, his eyes wide with confusion. This isn't the kind of thing you expect to see inside a police station. The smoke rises around his feet, swirling like it's alive. The temperature in the hallway drops rapidly, and the lights begin to flicker. Before he can react, he's pulled into a dark, shadowy realm. A long line of expressionless figures stands silently in the gloom, their eyes fixed on him. He realizes with a sinking feeling that he's been dragged back into the ghost bride's dream world. But this time, there are so many more people trapped here with him. He hears a chilling, familiar voice echoing through the darkness. Qi Nyang has found him again, and she doesn't sound happy. A massive, terrifying silhouette of the ghost bride looms over him. She demands to know the location of the waste token he took from the museum. The ghost bride's face is a mask of horror, her skeletal jaw hanging open as a long, purple tongue lolls out. Her red eyes burn with a predatory light as she looms over her prey in the dark realm. With a sudden, violent movement, the ghost bride lunges forward and sinks her spectral claws into Wei Yuan's chest. He cries out in shock and pain as she whispers an eerie promise to keep him in her world forever. Wei Yuan's scream echoes through the dark realm as shards of white paper erupt around him. The force of the spiritual attack seems to be tearing the dreamscape apart as he's forcibly pushed back into reality. Back in the real world, the two yellow talismans Xian Yi gave him burst into flames on the floor. Wei Yuan stands gasping for air, clutching his chest where the ghost bride's claws struck him in the dream. He stares at the blackened remains of the talismans, realizing that they were the only things that saved his life. The realization that the dream world can kill him is a heavy weight on his shoulders. He pulls his jacket open to find a jagged hole torn right through his shirt. The fact that a spiritual entity could leave such a physical mark on him through a dream is absolutely terrifying. The Qi army soldier manifests in a swirl of green energy, concern etched onto his skeletal features. Wei Yuan admits that he's shaken but insists he can't just wait for the ghost to come back for him. Determination replaces fear in Wei Yuan's eyes as a faint red glow flickers in his left pupil. He knows he has to take the fight to her, ordering his spiritual companion to help him prepare for the journey to Jiangnan. A few days later, the scene shifts to a quiet, dilapidated courtyard in Jiangnan. An old tree stands tall against a fiery sunset, its bare branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. An elderly man sits in a wooden chair beneath the tree, his voice a low, raspy chant as he sings a mournful song about a red bridal trousseau. He seems completely lost in his own world. The old man, old Mr. Jiang, suddenly stops singing and turns his head toward the entrance of the courtyard. He sensed someone approaching his lonely retreat. Wei Yuan stands at the gate, his signature zither case strapped to his back. He looks weary from travel but offers a polite greeting to the old man. Old Mr. Jiang remains seated, watching as the young man enters his domain. He remarks that it's been a very long time since anyone bothered to visit such a forgotten corner of the city. Wei Yuan walks toward him, taking in the state of the courtyard with its dry well and the massive, ancient tree. He finds it hard to believe that no one ever comes to see the old man. Old Mr. Jiang's gaze is distant as he explains that everyone he once knew has long since passed away. Even their descendants have eventually forgotten about him, leaving him in total isolation. Wei Yuan stops a few paces away, a look of sudden surprise crossing his face. There's something about the old man that feels strangely familiar to him. He focuses on a small mole near old Mr. Jiang's left eye, the same detail he saw on one of the figures in his terrifying dream. He starts to wonder if he's dealing with more than just a regular person. Old Mr. Jiang gestures toward the large case on Wei Yuan's back, curious about the young man's business. Wei Yuan quickly fabricates a story about being a traditional musician collecting folk songs. The old man nods slowly, seemingly accepting the explanation. Wei Yuan is relieved his cover story worked. In reality, the zither case hides an ancient Han sword he brought for protection. Inside the case, the polished blade of the eight-sided sword catches the light. It was the only weapon he could find in the museum that felt powerful enough to face a malicious ghost. Old Mr. Jiang mentions that a group of young people came by the day before. He notes that they didn't even step inside, just stood at the door for a moment and then left. Wei Yuan's eyes widen in surprise. He realizes that Zhou Yi and her team must have already investigated this place and decided there was nothing for them to do here. He imagines Zhou Yi, Xian Yi, and Zhao Yi standing at the gate, their sharp eyes scanning the courtyard for any signs of the malicious spirit they're hunting. He can't help but wonder why they chose not to enter. If this place is connected to the ghost bride, why would they just turn around and walk away without checking? His gaze drifts up to the massive tree looming over the courtyard, now bathed in an eerie, swirling green mist. The spiritual energy coming from it is palpable and dark. From a high vantage point, the layout of the courtyard becomes clear. The way the tree is positioned within the four walls forms the Chinese character 4, trapped, a classic architectural curse. He looks at the well, where the same green energy is gushing out like a geyser. The combination of the ghost energy below and the wood of the tree above forms the character 4, locust tree, an omen of death. Wei Yuan's breath hitches as he puts the pieces together. The entire courtyard is a meticulously designed spiritual trap, and he's standing right in the middle of it. He looks back at old Mr. Jiang, who is now cast in a dark, ominous shadow. He realizes that the old man isn't a survivor at all. He's a spirit who has been dead for a very long time. That's why the team didn't enter, they knew he was already gone. Stealing his nerves, Wei Yuan asks the old man if he knows anything about a specific woman from the theater's past. Old Mr. Jiang's expression hardens at the question. He specifies that he's looking for the girl who was once the most famous opera singer in all of Jiangnan. The mention of her seems to stir a deep, painful memory in the old man. Old Mr. Jiang's voice rises with a mix of shock and suspicion as he asks how a young man like him could possibly know about a girl from so long ago. He's clearly shaken by the mention of her. After a long silence, the old man's face softens into a look of profound sadness. He admits that he's glad someone finally asked, as he feared he would take the secret to his grave. The scene fades as old Mr. Jiang begins his story, one that dates back to the final, turbulent years of the Ming dynasty. The weight of centuries of silence begins to lift. In his mind's eye, the theater pavilion of the Chunshao troupe appears as it once was, a grand, brightly lit building filled with the sound of music and laughter. A little girl was once brought there to begin her training. A young woman in elaborate opera robes and a jeweled headdress stands on the stage. This is Qin Yang, whose beauty and voice made her an overnight sensation throughout the entire region. For a time, life was perfect. Qin Yang even found a sweetheart, and it seemed as though she was destined for a life of happiness and success. But history had other plans for her. The peace was shattered when Wokou pirates invaded the border and fought their way into Jiangnan. They were a brutal force, demanding food, wine, and women under the threat of a total massacre. The people of the theater troupe, terrified for their lives, gathered outside Qin Yang's door. Over 30 of them knelt on the ground, pleading with her to sacrifice herself to save them from the pirates. In the end, Qin Yang went. She sacrificed her own safety to accompany the pirates, ensuring that not a single member of her troupe would be harmed. But even as she went, the cruelty of others began. Years later, after the pirates had been defeated, Qin Yang returned to a world that had turned its back on her. People on the street pointed fingers and threw things, labeling her a woman with no virtue to hide their own shame. Old Mr. Jiang's face contorts with anger as he recounts how the very people she saved were the ones who slandered her. They needed to smear her name to find the moral high ground for themselves after their own cowardice. Against the backdrop of a blood-red moon, Qin Yang stands poised on the rim of a stone well. She is clad in the very red wedding dress she had meticulously sewn for herself, a garment that has now become her shroud as she was forced to take her own life. Wei Yuan listens to the tragic tale with a heavy heart, his hand tightening on his bag strap. He reflects on the persistent cruelty of human nature, a darkness that seems to transcend time and history, regardless of the era. Old Mr. Jiang looks up toward the sky as he recounts the supernatural event that followed the tragedy. Though it was only early autumn, a heavy snow began to fall, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the profound injustice done to Qin Yang. Wei Yuan's eyes widen as a white flake lands on his outstretched palm, followed by another and another. He is struck by the impossibility of the moment. It is currently early spring in Jiangnan, yet the old man's story has manifested a sudden, spectral winter chill. A sudden, violent eruption of dark green and black energy surges upward from the depths of the stone well. The spiritual pressure is immense, tearing through the air with a force that seems to shake the entire courtyard. Wei Yuan recoils from the sheer force of the manifestation, his face illuminated by the sickly green glow. He stares up at the towering pillar of energy, realizing with growing dread that the ghost bride herself may still be residing within that very well.